Joining us today for a webinar hosted by OneShield. Our topic today will be Uncrossing the Lines, Developing an Enterprise-Wide Application Strategy. Before we get started, we are going to just have a quick agenda here. We are going to go through some quick housekeeping as well as some introductions of the panelists that we have here today. We will be turning things over to one of our panelists, Martina Conlon, who's principal at Navarca, to give us a brief overview of some industry trends. And then for the rest of the presentation, we've prepared a variety of questions ranging from the RFP process, vendor selection, business case, implementation, risk challenges, and successes, results, and various words of wisdom from the various panelists that we'll review throughout the presentation. We do ask that today's presentation, even though you are all on mute, we do want it to be interactive. And in just a moment, I'm actually going to show you how there is an audio pin that you should have had there, and that there is a questions section that you should have on your screen. If you do have a question, please type it in there, and depending on our time today, we will try to do our best to answer that question live while we have the panelists. If we are not able to get to your question today, we will be taking any of those unanswered questions. We'll be compiling them. It will be anonymous, so your name will not be on it. We will be sending them along to our panelists so that they can respond, and we'll be getting them back to you shortly. So I would like to introduce myself. My name is Kim Morton. I actually head up marketing here at OneShield. I've got 12 years of experience driving technology into the property and casualty insurance space. I've been in software for over 18, including roles that vary from sales, business development, product management, and marketing. I've been in the core systems space for over 4 years and have my degree from Bryant, and my contact information is there. It'll also be at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions or need anything, feel free to reach out. I also would like to introduce one of our panelists today, Martina Conlon. She is one of the principals over at Navarca, who is one of the leading research and advisory analyst firms. I won't give you much background on Navarca. I'll leave that to Martina. But Martina, she has been with Navarca for quite a while now. She does focus in their property and casualty and healthcare space. Prior to joining Navarca, she had a variety of different roles in the insurance industry. More recently was over at Arbella Technology as the Director of Enterprise Technology, where she was responsible for all their enterprise applications, including all core systems like policy, billing, claims, BI, website, and portals. She's also had a variety of other principal consulting roles for other consulting companies. She has her MBA from Boston University as well as a bachelor's from Tufts. And she has her contact. And we'll be hearing more from her shortly and more about Navarca. Next, I would like to introduce another one of our panelists, Derek Oak, from the Dominion up in Canada. He is a senior information technology architect. He's been with the Dominion since 2004, and he provides architecture oversight for a multi-year project right now focused on core system replacement. Prior to joining the Dominion, he had worked with a variety of different technology providers with a strong focus on implementing policy as well as claims and billing systems for insurers across North America. He has a joint degree in computer science as well as business administration from the University of Waterloo, Wilfrid Laurier University up in Canada. And as far as the Dominion and who they are, I'm actually going to turn it over to Derek so he can give you a brief overview of who they are.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. The Dominion of Canada is owned and operated in Canada since 1887. It's one of the largest property and casualty insurance companies in Canada. It is a company that's fully dedicated to support an independent broker. So we're not, we write through brokers, and that's one of the things we'll probably talk about today as well in terms of the key styles or key architecture of our system, was to make sure we had a system that supported that independent broker channel. Thanks, Kim.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Derek. And lastly on our panel, we have Heather Peacock, also of OneShield. She is our Executive Vice President. She's in charge of client delivery and services. Heather has over 20 years of experience in the insurance industry, with serving in a variety of roles ranging from IT. She also had been a commercial lines producer. She's been with OneShield since 2000 and has extensive experience in managing professional services organizations, more specifically focused around policy management. and her degree is from SUNY. Again, we want to thank you all. I'm going to be turning things over to oh, actually, I do want to just say a little quick plug on OneShield, and then I'll turn things over to Martina. For any of you not familiar with OneShield, we are a provider, I should say a global provider of flexible content-rich policy billing and rating solutions. Our solution is called Dragon, hence you see the dragon on the screen. We built our solutions to manage and automate as many business processes as possible for all lines of business for the P&C industry. In the next few slides, I'm actually going to share a few metrics with you to get you a little bit more familiar, and then I'll be turning things over to Martina. Again, some metrics on OneShield. OneShield, the Dragon platform, has a combined 42 products in production across commercial, personal, as well as specialty lines of business. 65% of our customers use Dragon across multiple lines of business for commercial, personal, and specialty. We currently have 18 customers in production with others in implementation. Over 75% of our customers use our Dragon rating engine as their rating engine. And we've had 9 successful core Dragon upgrades in the past 24 months with others in implementation. One of our goals here at OneShield is we're not successful until our customers are successful, which means they're in production and that we have ensured them a streamlined upgrade path. And just a few other metrics I'd like to share with you is the fact that Dragon policy is in production across all 50 states for multiple lines of business. We are also in production outside of North America, in the UK, for professional liability in particular. What's interesting about that opportunity with that particular customer is they were able to take Dragon and be completely self-sufficient of OneShield to go into production in the UK. We have one customer in particular who is in production across 11 commercial lines of business. And this is another insurer who's completely self-sufficient of OneShield. When it comes to personal lines, we have a customer who's actually in production for 5 personal lines of business across the United States and is quickly adding more. And something we won't get into today, but down the road you'll hear about a private cloud offering that we've had here at OneShield for quite a while, and we currently have 5 customers leveraging that. And the last point I want to make here is that over 50% of our customers have committed to standardizing on Dragon as their enterprise policy management system. And so now I'll turn things over to Martina.
Thank you, Kim. As Kim mentioned, my name is Martina Conlin, and I'm a principal with Novarica. Novarica is a research and advisory firm focused on insurance technology. We do research on IT best practices, peer benchmarking for insurers, and the vendors that offer solutions in the space. We also offer consulting services, and we manage the research council of 350 CIOs across the insurance industry that participate in our research and attend knowledge sharing events that we hold a couple of times a year. Today we're going to talk about uncrossing the lines and developing an enterprise-wide application strategy for technology modernization. Next slide, please. As in my day-to-day work, we do a lot of consulting engagements. We work with our advisory clients, and we also work with our research council in understanding what their challenges are and what their long-term strategies are, and trying to help them define those long-term strategies. And many, many insurers are dealing with the mess that you see on your screen right now. Many carriers have a hairball type of technology architecture. It's a complex environment, lack of standards, lots of legacy sprinkled about that is inflexible technology that makes it slow to deliver any business capability to the market and deliver it quickly. There's high integration costs and high total cost of ownership very often, because in order to estimate even making a change or introducing a new capability requires that developers go in and learn the way that the code works right now, because very often things aren't documented and things are very complex. Next slide, please. But we also go into carriers and we find that some of them are dealing with one consolidated monolithic core system that's built on non-standard technology. So all of the capabilities for the organization could be in here. Policy, billing, claims, all in one big system that provides all capabilities across the organization. What we find here is that in order to upgrade or replace their technology, they have to really divvy up these solutions and introduce components to address policy, billing, and claims. Next slide, please. But the challenges when you have this type of monolithic large system are very similar to the systems that we saw on the previous page, because modernizing is a difficult thing to do. There are challenges in delivering new capabilities to the market. But regardless of what your challenge is, most carriers are striving for something more like this that is on your screen right now. A simple, consolidated, elegant technology architecture that's built on stable, modern technology so that you can respond quickly to your business needs. You have consolidated, non-redundant solutions that can be best of breed or suite. So how are they getting there nowadays? It used to be that migrating from the mess you saw on the first 2 pages to what you saw on the 3rd page was an incredibly big, hairy, scary project. And it still is a very, very large, complex project. But what we're finding today is that transformation projects have a higher rate of success now than they had in the past. There are a couple of reasons for this that we believe. Certainly, there are better vended solutions in the market to accelerate delivery, reduce cost, and reduce risk. The vendors are better at partnering with carriers in order to deliver these solutions. Carriers are better at delivering these solutions, especially around integration work. Carriers in the last 5 to 10 years have become very, very strong in dealing with integration and XML and integration technologies. All of this equates to a higher success rate in the industry overall. As I said, they are still very large, complex projects, but they really are more successful now than they were 5 or 10 years ago. Because we've had so many successes, we are finding now that for the first time we have some metrics that we've been able to gather about these types of projects. And in the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to go through the metrics that we gathered during a survey that we conducted at the end of last year around policy admin replacements. So we're going to talk about costs and time frames and challenges and things like that. And really, the fact that these metrics are available now are very helpful for people who are planning their transformation projects now. Every project is going to be different, so costs and durations and things like that will differ for you. But having these averages out there, being able to leverage those, can really help you determine whether you have a business case for your technology transformation. And understanding what others have done and the challenges and lessons learned there can also help you understand whether this is a viable option for you. Next slide, please. So before we go into the detailed survey results for policy admin replacements, I just wanted to spend a minute talking about what the high priority projects are for U.S. insurers in 2013. This is some research that we just conducted. It's been published within the last 2 weeks. And what it shows is that, surprise, surprise, policy admin system replacement and continuing replacement projects is the top priority for many, many carriers out there. You can see in this chart that mid-size P&C organizations and large P&C organizations, almost 50% are prioritizing policy admin projects. Also, large life and annuity organizations are prioritizing that. Next, we see that business intelligence is a high priority for both mid-size and large P&C organizations, and claims also. So there's an awful lot of core system activity going on. Again, policy admin has been the priority for the last 3 to 4 years and will continue to be the priority for 2013. Now going into our survey results, again, we conducted this survey at the end of last year, and we asked a lot of questions about scope, approach, cost, and duration that I'm going to share with you. What we first found is that when we looked at project scope, why and what is the scope of the replacement that you're about to, conducted, we found that, as in the past, there was a good number of carriers that were adding a new system to support new lines of business. So either expanding geography or introducing new lines of business such as workers' comp or something like that. We had 9% of large P&C organizations report that that was the scope of their policy replacement, and 15% report that that was the scope of mid-size organizations report that scope. We found that there were a good number in both categories that were replacing a single legacy system for an existing lines of business. But we found certainly the majority of policy admin replacements were to replace multiple legacy systems for existing lines of business. So really, consolidation and simplification is a prevalent approach that's going on in the market right now. And that is a big change from 4 to 5 years ago, where we would more commonly see a new system to support a new line of business. We also asked about the lines of business that they were introducing within the scope of their policy admin replacement, and we found that there's certainly a good mix of personal and commercial going on. Anecdotally, we see an awful lot of activity around commercial lines right now in terms of a lot of the policy admin selection projects and research projects are really focused on commercial lines right now. But there is certainly, in this response, there were a number of mixed personal and commercial implementations going on. What we also found is that workers' comp is commonly put onto the same platform as the other lines, and that admitted commercial lines was probably the leading lines of business that were implemented within the policy systems for the survey respondents. Next slide, please. Very interesting metric that we learned from this survey was the project completion times that were reported. As we can see here, let's start with the chart on the right. For mid-sized P&C organizations, we asked, how long did it take you to get your initial release out, and how long did it take you for full implementation? And we can see here that, for example, for the initial release, 23% reported that they were able to get their initial release out in 6 to 10 months, and another 23% reported it took 11 to 15 months. As we look at the full implementations, we can see the most commonly reported time frame was 51 months or more for full rollout. So obviously there is still a lot of room for improvement, but certainly getting to that initial release, carriers are getting better. I think that as they embrace agile and iterative methodologies and become more comfortable with the technology, certainly we may see some improvement there, but there certainly is a good ways to, there is room for improvement, certainly. As we look at large P&C organizations, we see that most of the full implementations are falling in the 21 to 25 to 36 to 40 month time frames, with an awful lot of them being complete, the first release being completed in 6 to 10 months. Another interesting metric that we received, or we assessed during this assessment, really was project costs. It's great to get a detailed breakdown of average costs and expense within these projects and average costs that mid-size and large carriers are experiencing. In this research, we found that the average cost for a policy admin replacement project for a mid-size organization was reported to be $8.7 million. That's internal and external cost included. Large carriers, significantly different net metric here. Large carriers, the average cost was $23.5 million. So big difference there in the amount of money that's being invested in these projects based on the size of the company. For mid-sized carriers, the average internal staff was about 50% of the total project costs. Software licenses were about 18%, and external services were about 18%. In large carriers, the breakdown is similar, although it's much higher total amount of money going out invested into these projects. So as I said before, certainly your experiences may differ. Things are very different based on the scope of the project, but it's nice to have some metrics here that you can validate your estimates or use as somewhat placeholders when you're pulling together a very, very preliminary business case. We also asked about project impacts. So after the policy admin solution was implemented into production, really what were the benefits that you received? And we found that the major improvements were around technology risk, certainly, speed to market of new functionality or extended functionality, more efficient internal workflows, and ease of doing business for both distributors and end users. It really is a very compelling argument for policy admin projects for both large and small carriers, but certainly understanding the duration and the investment that is necessary to support these projects is very critical when determining your business case. So it's great to see that there is really positive impact from these, but it certainly has to be leveraged and balanced with the other items. So what we recommend highly as you get started with this, certainly pulling together your high-level business case in order to determine if you can move forward with the benefits and the costs associated. But also as important is defining a technology vision and a roadmap for getting there. As we can see in this diagram, an enterprise architecture blueprint is really the architectural governance for solution development. Just like project management and portfolio management is the project management governance for solution development. Both are very, very critical for the success of very complex programs, such as policy admin replacement projects. What we recommend is that you develop an architectural blueprint and a technology roadmap to guide and drive your technology transformation that can be defined at a very high level up front and driven down to more detail in iterations. Define the data, application, and technology architectures. Define the major components, how they interface and interact. Define whether you'll buy or build those components, and determine your preferred tech stack. So as you drive, once you have a high-level picture of where you want to be, draft a high-level implementation plan, and then revisit this on a regular basis as you go through your technology transformation. And with that, I believe I'm going to pass it back to Kim for the Q&A session.
Great. Thank you so much, Martina. So now we will start our QA session. And as mentioned before, we would like to try to make this interactive. So you do see that there's a questions area on your screen. If you do have any questions, please type them in there, and we will try to answer it live. And if we can't, we will answer it after the webinar. As far as the format, you're going to see that we've selected a variety of questions. We have them categorized around build versus buy, implementation. So what you're going to see is we're going to ask a few questions. We'll have the panelists respond, and we've also tried to summarize what we call some words of wisdom for each of the sections for you as well. So let's get started. So our first set of questions are around business case, buy versus build, as well as suite versus best of breed. One of the first questions that we have here was around what was your business case for your transformation? How about, Martina, I'll start with you.
Certainly when we work with our clients and the members of our research council, we discuss business case, quite frequently. The most common driver and benefit outlined in a business case that we see is speed to market of new products or new functionality. So being able to introduce variations to your existing product very quickly, within weeks versus months, or introducing new end customer capabilities around, document delivery or customer service or billing. So we see really speed to market as being the #1 priority for most carriers today. We also see, general ease of doing business for agent as a priority, operational efficiencies, and technology simplification. Very occasionally, we see technology risk as a driver, but when it's there, it can be in a very high priority, especially if the carrier has reverted to, purchasing hardware on eBay and things like that, which is probably more common than most people think.
And Derek, how about you? Since you actually, are from the insurer side on this panel, what was your business case for your transformation?
There was a few things. I mean, initially we moved from a monolithic legacy mainframe solution that housed our claims, our policy, and our billing. And we didn't really see much growth potential moving that platform any further. There were problems with the hardware, also with the space, and what it got down to, anytime we wanted to do a change, whether it was a change to enhance the business, there was always reasons why it was too hard, too difficult to do. Let's not do it exactly like we want to do because the system would just take too long. And it got to a point where the only things we were able to put through were more legislative changes, things we had to get through, not the changes we wanted to put through. And it also got down to, we wanted to get better rating. And to get better rating, we had to get a better idea of our data. And to get a better idea of our data, we had to get our data out of the system so we can analyze it. So we had to look back and say, okay, what is the, where is all our data? How do we understand our data? How can we model that? And then from that information, adjust our rates going forward, adjust how we rate. So to do that full cycle, we really couldn't do that in our current systems. So we were really looking for a way where we could transfer our current book of business over, analyze that book of business through some predictive modeling, pull the relevant details, and then be able to adjust our rates the way we want to adjust them without it being a very long project. So it really was to grow and move our business as we move forward. We also wanted to have more modern printing, more modern reporting, and a more modern billing, giving more options to the client.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Derek. And Heather, interested to hear from you from a technology provider perspective. What do you see out there in the sales cycles as far as the drivers for business case transformations?
I would echo what Martina mentioned as well as being the most common drivers that we see for our clients as well. And then I would also add the spin that operational flexibility is pretty important. And by that I mean in order for the business to really transform the way they do business and meet their goals and meet market challenges and have competitive products, et cetera, they need flexibility within their operations and more control both within the business and within the service operations to make changes to the system as either the market demands or their customers' demands or their brokers' demands. So having a system that is flexible and then extends that flexibility throughout the organization would be another a driving factor that we see.
Terrific. And now this next question, we're going to start with you, Derek, on how did you approach it from a buy versus build perspective as well as a suite versus best of breed?
Sure. The build versus buy, I mean, I think not many people are really building anymore. I think with all the, the products out there, the way that they're packaged over the years, and Martina mentioned as well, these products are coming along, and it really comes down to, are you going to be doing a package solution or a best of breed solution? And that's why I kind of say the best of breed is kind of new build in terms of if you want to still maintain ownership of your product and where you want to go. If you're doing the best of breed, you're picking different products. Maybe some products are the same, some different. But you're really then being more responsible for the integration of those products together. You want to make sure that those products can talk together, they can work together, and they can, meet the business processes. So as a company, if you're looking at the best of breed, you're looking at taking much more, it's more cost, there's more work, you're taking much more ownership of the integration, the testing of the systems together. But I think if you have the size of the company and you can invest in that, there's advantages to that because you do maintain a bit more ownership as you much better understand and control the data between your systems and how those systems want to talk and integrate with each other. You probably have a bit more flexibility with upgrade paths and things like that. But there is a cost, like I mentioned, versus the best of breed, the suite, where you're looking more for a suite to provide the solution. You want the integration taken care of, and you just, you want the systems to work together, and you're okay with the upgrade path and the changes that come along from the vendor. So from our experience, we were looking more for the best of breed suited us more from where we wanted to go. And like I said, the ownership of the data, ownership of the integration we wanted with the systems, but it did come with the cost of supporting and taking ownership of that integration.
Excellent, thank you. And actually, Martina, we'd be interested to hear what Novarica is seeing out there as far as any market trends.
Sure. Well, certainly the market is trending towards build versus, buy versus build. You rarely see build. I mean, you'll see build with very large direct carriers in particular where they have unique requirements around scale or competitive differentiators that they really need to support. But most typically, we will see the buy approach. From a suite versus hybrid, a suite versus best of breed perspective, there certainly is a preference and a trending towards suite. Certainly 5 years ago, there was the pendulum was over on the best of breed approach. However, we are seeing that pendulum come back towards the suite approach. And we're seeing both a full suite of policy billing claims, typically loosely coupled so that they don't all three have to be implemented together. But there is some pre-integration offered between the separate components from the same vendor. But we're also seeing very commonly policy and billing coming from one vendor and claims coming from another. And so sort of that hybrid suite versus best of breed is pretty common also.
Marta, have you seen an ordering of people doing a placement like policy first, then claims, and then billing, or do they do it in different orders?
Most commonly, a lot of carriers have already upgraded or consolidated and replaced their claim solution. And that's also a result of the fact that, most commonly you have one claims organization even in the largest carriers. So we very often see that claims was the first consolidated platform, and then policy and billing are done together very commonly. If they're not done together, usually we'll see policy followed by billing.
Great. So as far as our words of wisdom, what you're hearing here is don't build unless absolutely necessary. Last thing you want to do is recreate the wheel. And clearly, based on what we're hearing from Martina and what we've heard from Dara's experience, buying and having the ability to modify the package that most clearly meets your requirements is definitely the best route to go. Some of the other tones that you've heard today is around aligning your approach to the business needs. You've heard mention of speed to market, the fact that you need to have market as well as product agility, differentiators, and that you have to make sure to stay on track, make sure that the architecture is the appropriate architecture for what your vision is, and understand the complexity of the solution that you're about to implement, as well as carefully review any of your upgrade requirements. You want to make sure that you're going to have the ability to take advantage of any of the new enhancements. Let's face it, when you put in a core system, this is a system you're going to have for the long haul. And I'm actually going to turn over to the panelists if they have any other words of wisdom they'd like to add before we move to our next set of questions.
Hi, Kim. This is Heather. I think I would just add that if you do make the decision to buy a system, commonly in the past, the way you selected a system, some of the criteria would be based on, does the system meet 80% or maybe most of my current needs today? And if so, I can configure the remaining 20%, fill my gaps, and then go to production. But I actually think the more important way to look at the system you're selecting is asking yourself the question, does this system have the flexibility and the design flexibility to meet the unknown needs of my future? And that may be the more important question to ask than whether or not it meets what you need today.
Yeah, because I think, especially like the buy approach is and some of the things we talked about later too is, but you get down a mindset of something that you got to make sure the whole company buys in the fact that you are buying a product. There are certain things you will adapt to by buying that product, and you want to make sure you have that expectation through from IT, through the business that focus, and I think Martina said, focus in on what your unique things are. What are your competitive advantages? Focus on that, and put your chips in for that. But where you can sit back and say, you know what, the rest of the industry does billing this way, on this way, or this type of thing is not really my competitive. We're willing to change. I think the sooner you start that mentality in the project, the more successful you'll be.
Great. Thank you so much. Now on to our next set of questions, which are going to be around the RFP selection process. So we'll start with you, Derek. How did you select your technology provider?
Well, probably not too atypical to most vendor selection. I mean, we start with a selection process, but before we go into a formal RFP, you definitely want to survey the market and do your research and find out who the different vendors are. But you do want to go more in a deep dive. You know, most people choose 3 vendors to look at. You want to make sure you get a lot of input into the RFP. Like, it's not just a technical RFP, it's not just a business RFP, but you really want to ask from different levels, even including delivery preferences, delivery methodology, because every company is going to have their own way of doing, you know, an agile development and SDLC-like development, and you want to get some of those things understood. Not that it's going to change your decision, but it might help you understand that. Also with criteria, I think what we found is also avoiding you want to have a lot of questions, but if you start marking each individual question, each individual RFP answer to like a score, a yes or a no, you're guaranteed going to end up with everyone's going to get 71%, no matter how different the solutions are. Just the law of averages, the law of numbers, it always works out to that. So you really want to look at, okay, what are of all the things I'm asking, what are really the, you know, get back to that point, make it like I need this to work. You know, I need to be secure. It's going on the internet. If it's not secure, it can't go on. That's just a deal breaker there. So bring those questions up, get those yes or no, and then all the other questions that can still help support it. But it just helps you see the right responses. Production experience is for most companies quite important. You want to see proven production experience. You generally don't want to be the first one in unless you've made some kind of arrangement or you're a trial client, but right now I think there's enough out there with production experience. You definitely want to do some reference calls, some visits, see what they're experiencing, what their issues are, and also how similar lines of businesses are, because even within one line of business, the volumes could be different, the number of the business processes could be different, the number of rules. So you really want to get in there, see their system, talk to the people, get their understanding and their experience with the systems. And then just the working with the client, and when you're working with the vendors, get the feel of those other people that you want to work with. You'll be working a lot with the RFP, and if you realize the length of these projects are not short, you're with these folks for 2-3 years. You want to make sure you guys have a good understanding and mutual agreement of how you want to work together. Yeah.
Excellent. And Martina, it'd be interesting to hear what you see, especially since Novarka does runs quite a few vendor selection processes out there.
I've been with Novarka for a little over 3 years, and I've done 14 vendor selection projects, and it's always very interesting, and clients have different priorities, but we bring to the table a proven process and an understanding of the solutions in the space that we can typically get through a full vendor selection anywhere from 12 weeks to 16 weeks. And it typically is composed of an RFI phase, a demo phase, and a reference phase. But we do bring certain assets and knowledge to the table that we can accelerate the overall time frame and help ensure a solid selection at the end. But when we work with our carriers, we spend time really focusing on what they do different. So for example, every policy system allows you to conduct a new business transaction. Every policy system will allow you to do a policy change transaction. However, the way they approach, premium audit may be a little bit different, or the way they have you conduct out-of-sequence endorsements may be different. What we try and focus on is requirements around what the carrier does that's different, and understanding those gaps between their unique behaviors and what these products offer out of the box, and including those types of questions in the RFI. So we go forward with a lightweight RFI and then move into a very detailed demo and then on to references. What we are finding is that carriers really are prioritizing out-of-the-box functionality. So, what are those gaps around the way my products and the way I do business versus what it comes out of the box? Vendor track record is extremely important. Nobody seems to, very few carriers, let me put it that way, want to be an early adopter. Very few carriers will go with a vendor who hasn't proven themselves with somebody who is like them, and configuration capabilities. So I would say out-of-the-box functionality, vendor track record, and configuration capabilities are the top three criteria that they're weighing the most.
Excellent. And Heather, I'd be curious what you're seeing out there, since you are one of those vendors who
Sure.
is frequently being asked to come in.
Yeah, I echo Martina's view of the vendor track record. Since I'm on the delivery side of OneShield, what I think is critical, policy replacement or any kind of transformation that involves policy is large, it's complex, and so I think it's critical that, that the vendor you choose has experience with the complexities that surround not just the configuration of policy, but everything that surrounds it. So do they have experience with the complexities of data migration and conversion? That can be a huge problem right there that needs to be solved. It has to have the right strategy, et cetera. It typically should be its own work stream. Can this vendor help you solve the customer centricity problem, which may or may not exist depending on how you're replacing your legacy? But if your legacy can't all be replaced in the very first production release, then you're going to have to understand the problem of having customer data and records existing in potentially multiple places, and which one is the customer record, how do you keep it synchronized, and how do you assure that you're syncing through all the implications when you start solutioning how to do that transition over time. And I think integration complexity and strategy is very important. Obviously, you're moving to a more modern system or a more modern enterprise, and so you want to make sure that you've designed the integration around the policy to all the other systems in a way that allows you to, in the future, replace modules with some ease, and that you have an integration strategy that minimizes how you make updates to all those integrations in the future as things change in each of those subsystems, as well as in the policy system. So I think that expertise is critical.
Terrific. And now our next question is, what vendor best practices would you recommend? And I'll actually start with Martina on this one.
I think one of the most important things is, as carriers, is to make yourself important to the vendor. I know that you naturally should be important to the vendor because you are giving them lots of money, but it's more important to even just stay in their face, quite honestly, all of the time. Be active in advisory boards, user groups, co-present with them at industry conferences, give references if they're going to be positive, but really engage with your vendor. View your vendor as a partner. Look for commitment on both ends, and honestly, don't expect perfection, but do expect a partner that can work through issues to mutual benefit and make the relationship work for both organizations.
And Heather, how about you? What is your take on that?
I think it's really important that, from my perspective, again, with the delivery team, I know that our folks feel far more committed to the project when they really understand what the business challenges are that they're solving and what the expected business outcomes and benefits are. So while you do a business case up front to justify the selection of the system, helping that vendor really understand that business case as well as your business drivers and goals and how that specifically ties to what you're doing within the technology replacement project helps that whole team from your vendor feel responsibility and also ownership in helping you achieve those goals, and really just makes the journey that much more committed for everyone involved when you understand that business case.
And Derek, what about your thoughts?
I think from the vendor management best practices, I take it a slightly bit different direction, but some of the best practices, especially that we see from vendors, is they know the product, they own the product, they wrote the product. How you want to, and again, traditionally we call it development phase, you might want to call it configuration phase, but the methodology they have for configuration, the steps they go through, you really want to understand the vendor's way of doing that because they know the best way to develop it with. You want to follow that. It may not necessarily match your style of development, but I think that's what you want to take away and learn from that. There's other managements too, like, you know, they might come with a project management style or a testing style. You may choose to do that differently depending on what you want to do in your house, how that fits. But and overall, I just say, you know, look at all their practices, pick the ones you like, the ones that you want to learn from. Use this as an opportunity to change your other development projects. You may have some legacy projects that maybe following a different methodology. You like what you're seeing over here. You might want to move over there. So treat it as a two-way experience to learn, as well as to maybe enhance other projects you have in your house.
Terrific. And some of the words of wisdom is, of course, confirm that you have the experience in-house to go forward with a vendor selection, or work with a company like Novarica, for example, who has that experience and can help you through the process. And you heard Derek mention this, as well as Martina and Heather. You know, make sure that the technology provider you're working with has a similar view and vision of how your organization is looking to leverage technology, and you want to try to keep yourself a step ahead. And for the sake of time, we're actually going to continue to move forward and not ask for any additional words of wisdom, because we've got a lot of other great questions to ask. And so now on to our next section, which is around implementation, which we know is always one of the big challenges and, you know, concerns for folks. So with our first question, we're going to actually turn over to Derek. And this question is, did you develop an enterprise blueprint before you started?
Right, yes. Different, you know, there's different names for that in different architecture documents. But what we call them, or you call it blueprint, is that what is that candidate architecture you're developing? And that candidate architecture, we had it spread not just for the one system at a time we're doing policy, or not just for claims, but for the whole landscape, from policy billing, claims, data warehousing, security, reporting, all the way down. And what we want to do is really want to develop that blueprint, that candidate architecture, and you want to use that through your whole project. So if you develop early up front, and this is where you can start drawing those components, those boundaries, you know, what should print do, what should policy do, what should billing do, what it shouldn't do. You get some high-level functional requirements from that. You want to develop that front, and then you can use that through the whole project. You can use that before you go to the vendors, and use it as, you know, a scorecard to measure against, to say, oh yeah, this vendor does do this in this component, but doesn't do this or does do that. So it's a good way to measure it, checklist to make sure you're not missing anything. And you want to include components, you want to include your integration strategy, you want to include your data and your data architecture as well. From that, then when you don't have to expect that is, you know, this is just a candidate, it's an ideal, it's not what you're going to implement. So as you go forward, you'll still develop your software architecture documents do match what you're implementing. You can always go back to your candidate architecture, your blueprint, to compare it, to know, you know, where am I deviating? Is it important that I'm deviating? And what does that mean? So it is quite important to have that blueprint before you start. The other thing too is the strategy of how you want to implement, because going from a monolithic system, everything's together. It's very hard to start, you know, pulling out pieces of the old system and putting in the new system, because every time you pull something out, it comes up with a whole other lot of things, or it comes out like a Jenga game where you pull one thing out and everything falls on it. So you got to make sure you're pulling things out in a controlled fashion, and you're implementing it properly. So besides the blueprint, you want to make sure implementation strategy, how you're implementing it, and what order you're implementing it is. Is it causing you the least amount of, you know, what we call coexistence issues, that you're not dealing with two different systems? And is it providing enough business value at the same time? Because you don't want the implementation to be so long that you're going to lose, you know, touch with what you're trying to do, like legislation changes come in, or the business just sits around waiting for something. So you want to make sure they're deliverable, the implementation is deliverable, it's providing help, it's providing a solution, but that it's something that is not going to, that does work and isn't causing you coexistence issues with your other systems.
Great. And Heather, what's your experience been working with insurance carriers regarding an enterprise blueprint?
Sure. You know, I concur with Derek that having the carrier having created a candidate architecture is a great first step. And then as you look at solutions or vendor products that can start to fit into that new candidate architecture, I think what you'll find today, many systems have crossed multiple functional boundaries. So, for example, the policy system may also do billing. It may also have reinsurance capability. It may have broker management and agent management capability. It may have customer management capability. And so, as you look at your architecture of the future, you have to decide where is it important that you have distinct modules, and where is it a good idea to leverage or perhaps extend the existing capabilities of that policy system, as if it, for example, reduces costs or gives you long-term maintenance efficiency. So those are some decisions that you'll have to keep in mind as you reflect on the solutions you're actually purchasing and how that may relate back to your candidate architecture.
Great, and actually we'll go on to the next question around how the team was organized and what program level resources were assigned. And actually we're going to ask Martina to start this one off just based on her experience with these various vendor selection processes.
I think, organizing your team as a program itself is one of the most critical points for these large, complex projects. And typically, the resources that we see assigned at a program level, certainly you'll have a program manager that has multiple project managers reporting to that person. You may have project managers for release of certain lines of business. You may have a project manager for conversion. You may have a project manager for different threads, but they all typically report into an overall program manager who is the accountable manager for the overall program. Additionally, you'll have a business sponsor who is typically responsible for the business sponsorship and advocacy of the program as a whole. You may have business sponsors down at the individual module level too, but very often we see a program level business sponsor as a key individual there. And also an architect at the program level, having someone who understands how all of the pieces fit together across the individual projects is very, very important. Sometimes we'll also see a business architect across a program, which is very, very beneficial. So someone who is aligning the business processes and the business analysis across the different efforts within the program.
And Heather or Derek, would you have anything to add to that? Is there any resource that Martina missed?
Well, I'll just jump in real quick. I don't know. I think Martina is dead on right that all of those roles are extremely important. And I would say I would only add to it to say the other reason those roles are important is often within the IT landscape there are different methodologies that need to be employed depending on the system. So you may have an area of your IT group that's accustomed to waterfall practices because they've either, it's how they do legacy system updates, or perhaps your data conversion work stream should follow a waterfall approach. But then you're going to have other areas within your IT organization that may be doing agile or iterative development. And when all of those work streams are in play as part of your business and system transformation, you've got to have that architect up at the top, as Martina mentioned, as well as a program manager who can help all of those work streams align their timelines and also align and set expectations for when they all come together into a unified testing work stream at the end. So being able to manage multiple kind of methodologies and keeping an eye on what the critical paths and dependencies are between those work streams that may be operating differently really requires a sophisticated leader at the top to keeping an eye on all of those.
And we want to talk about data conversion. So Derek, when it came to your data conversion strategy, if you can share the route that the Dominion had decided to take.
Yeah, with our data conversion, it's probably one of the things you, in the industry you hardly ever see. Most of the times you do the conversion on renewal that takes over a year. We had a very interesting product where we actually chose to go against that grain, and we did a conversion. We call it a big bang conversion. Over the weekend, converted the whole book of business over. So that's the approach we took. Looking at our future lines, we're probably going to go more for non-renewal. But again, going back to what I mentioned earlier about the coexistence, especially the big bang conversion helps with the
Anything you'd like to add around data conversion?
I think there are a lot of viable strategies, both on renewal and Big Bang, and it really depends on your business mix and which core system you're replacing.
As far as some of our words of wisdom, some of the things you've heard is, of course, it's critical. You heard it from both Martina and Heather around staff and determining who the appropriate staff people are. And on that note, also making sure that you find the right people, because that's going to be the biggest component of key to your success of an implementation. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all of our questions today. So what we would like to do is at least just address some of the risks and challenges for the audience here. And we'll actually turn this over to Derek. What did you perceive as the major risks for your core policy management transformation?
I mean, the main risks really among all the traditional risk management project this is one, the size. This the sheer size of the project, and because the first implementation is always the biggest. We try not to do projects that span more than a year and a half. When you're approaching that like their project, that's where you risk a lot of different things coming up in the system, different priorities coming, people changing roles, people losing sight. So the challenge we had is how do you deliver enough functionality, enough usable functionality, and like we talked about, include conversion, integration, in a project that is about 16 months to production. And that the size of the project just becomes quite large, and it goes back to the program management that Martina mentioned that we like in place. If you have the proper program management, the proper business sponsors, it helps with that risk.
And here are some final words of wisdom. As you had heard throughout today's presentation and Q&A, it's critical for you to be sure to invest in your new technology and make sure that your organization is keeping pace. It's not just about the processes and the tools, but more importantly, the people, because it's the people that are going to be supporting these systems in the long term. Which leads us to our next point, which is people are what make your implementations a success. The technologies and tools are there to assist them. And then lastly, there's always going to be challenges along the way. But as you heard, it's important for you to make sure to plan for them. Don't get discouraged when they arise, and make sure that you use that as an opportunity to learn and continuous improvement. So thank you for joining today. We would like to go to the next slide to thank our panelists. Thank you to Martina Conlon from Novarica, as well as Derek Oak from the Dominion, and Heather Peacock from OneShield. Thank you all for attending. Again, my name is Kim Morton. If you would like a copy of the presentation, please feel free to contact me. My email is kimorton@oneshield.com. And feel free to go to OneShield's website to learn more about our Dragon application. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.